Hi folks, it's Gary here, and a very warm welcome to the fourth official here on YouTube for a very special Monday night live Q&A. And you can get involved in the show just by dropping your comments, and we'll be able to see them on the screen as they come along. Joining me on this stream, making their debut here on the fourth official from the This Is Ibrox podcast. It's Ian Mitchell. Ian, it's been a long time, I think, since we've tried to get you here onto the fourth official. So I'm very glad to welcome you to the show.
A pleasure to be here, mate. It's always nice to talk about Rangers, but I think this week in particular, it's a little bit more special than usual. So I'd like to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. And it's a good time, obviously, to be here because there's plenty to talk about. Obviously, over the course of the weekend, we had the confirmation of the 49ers and the buyout and the new ownership, and we obviously covered that on a couple of videos we did over the weekend and some podcasts. Be delighted to get your thoughts in terms of what you think about the new direction of the club. I think new hands, fresh ownership, and having adults in the room certainly is going to be much welcome after the last couple of years.
Very much so. Yeah, it just seems like we've got proper people in the right places for once. And it's obviously very early days. We've not seen too much actual substantial activity going on so far. But even in these first few days, you're seeing moves that, to me, make sense. Obviously, the rumours of the manager rumble on, but I think they're leading towards the right appointment if they go the Ancelotti way for me as well. So it's a very good start. We've got people, as I say at the start there, who aren't doing these jobs in terms of coming from nowhere, just getting into a role, which is something we've done as a club for way too long now. It's just been promoting from within for no real substance or with no real example of why they're going there. So, yeah, it's very promising. I'm trying to pinch myself. As I say, it's going a bit too well. So, long may that continue.
Yeah, people actually with a bit of a track record, and that's just been added to, obviously, today being Kevin Felwell's first day in office. And he's been joined by an old friend in Dan Purdy, who is going to be fronting up, I think, a lot of the kind of recruitment conversations with Niels Coppin going out the door. I don't think it's a massive surprise, obviously, given the fact that Niels Coppin took on a role last season that I think, just as you were alluding to there, Ian, that he probably wasn't that qualified for in terms of that overriding kind of sporting director role that he kind of had. So maybe not a massive surprise that he's kind of moving on, although he is staying on for a little while to kind of ease the transition into Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy. I think time with regards to Niels Coppin may well be a little bit more kind than maybe what it feels today, but he certainly was influential in terms of the arrival of players such as Hamza Yaman and Hiefty last summer, Mohamed Diamande as well. So they're all players that we'd expect will be able to make Rangers a lot of money, whether or not this summer or not, but certainly in the future. Other players such as Nadeem Bayrami and Robin Proper, slightly less successful, but whether or not they were top of the list at the time or not, I think we probably know that's probably not been the case. They've not been the first choices when they've came in. But be interesting to see just in terms of with the new structure, what that'll look like in terms of player trading, because we've already seen today stories regarding Robin Proper looking back at for going to Holland, FC20 accredited with an interest in bringing him back. And I think for the right money that there's certainly a deal that can be done there with him. Ridvan Yilmaz, another player over the course of the weekend, been linked once again, unsurprisingly, with a return back to Turkey. And again, I'm not sure there'll be too many Rangers fans who'll be that disappointed if we take a deal for Ridvan Yilmaz. And I think the story's there that pretty much everyone in the squad is available at the right price.
Yeah, I think they have to be, because as much as it's great news, we're getting this investment and money's coming into the club, there's still a lot of guys in there that you need to move on. And I think that's part of Coppin's role. I mean, people talk about Coppin, and you mentioned it yourself, there's a couple of good ones in there. a few bad signings, but the big, massive negative for me has been how little funds we've generated from the sales of players over the last 18 months or so. I mean, last season's well documented. The guys that literally went out the door just to clear up wages. We made no real money on them, despite the fact there's some good footballers in amongst that. And as you touched on, these guys, your Ridvans, your Propers, Bajrami, we know they're not going to cut it at Rangers. They're not going to be the guys that deliver us success. And yes, there's, again, decent footballers there, but if you can't rely on players, if they can't impact games for you, if they can't deal with Scottish football, which those three in particular just simply cannot do, they can't stay here. Because as much as I say, they're decent footballers and they might give us a moment or two here or there, they're not going to give you that prolonged success that we've been crying out for. So yes, you need to get them out the door, but you need to then generate the money, because as the statement read out, as you guys spoke about on Friday there's 20 million coming in, but we all know 20 million isn't going to do enough to make us properly compete for that league title. We need more on top of that. So if you can get a couple of million for a Ridvan, if you can get the money back on Proper, same idea as Bajrami, there's a longer list, sadly, than that we need to get out the door. But if you start to make that towards your 30 millions, 35 millions, add in a couple of big sales in there, suddenly you've got a proper, I don't want to say war chest, but you've got a properly decent amount of money to actually invest in some properly good footballers. And as I say, you need to make room for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I don't think that there'll be that many people that will shed too much of a tear if the likes of Robin Proper or Nadine Bayrami are moved on by Rangers this summer. Other players such as Nico Rashkin and Mohamed Diamandi, who was linked over the weekend with Everton, whether that was papers putting two and two together, given that there's obviously a lot of synergy, I think, at the moment between Rangers and Everton. But I think it goes without saying, Ian, that Mohamed Diamandi's got the skill set and the attributes probably to be an EPL player, maybe in the future, maybe not necessarily this summer. But no surprises for me that teams maybe towards that kind of middle or kind of lower end of the Premiership, which Everton are, would be looking at a player of the profile of a Mohamed Diamandi.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as one of the rare success stories, I'd say, of Niels Coppin's time, is the fact that, yeah, we paid, 4.5 million or so for Diamandi. It's a big outlay for us, obviously, but you can see the potentials there. The more sort of high-level games he plays, I think the better he's going to get, because we saw it firsthand in Europe. He was brilliant, man of the match in plenty of European games over the course of this season, but when it came to that domestic side of it, just never really clicked. But even in saying that, I still think we make a decent profit on him. But I'd be interested to see what kind of profit that would be, because as I say, if we're paying 4 or 5 million, I don't think we're selling for like 5 or 6 million. We're going to properly generate maybe double what we paid. But the bit of frustration for me is that I think I suspect Diamandi can get a lot better. So whether it is another year here, plays in Europe a bit more, plays under a new manager, a new style, all these things could properly progress his career. And then you're suddenly looking at a guy probably worth 15, 20 million if you can add some goals, if you can add some control, this kind of stuff. But it's like you said right at the offset, everyone in this squad is for sale at this point. If we get a good offer, I think you have to just shake hands and move some guys on, whether it is a Raskin or Diamandi. As much as it's the two, probably a long figure man, the only guys in the squad most of us actually like, which is a bit harsh to say maybe, but it's the three guys that you could see a team being built around. If English Premier League come calling for any player, they're gone. It's as safe as that. And if it's an Everton paying 12, 13 million, that's absolute pocket change for a team down there. So you'd imagine Diamandi's worth the risk. And I know he's a good guy in terms of like the stats that you see and how stats focused football teams are these days, even going back to his days at Northland. So I'd be probably more surprised if Diamandi stayed, to be honest. I think the way things are going, he will be one of the big sales that I was talking about right at the start.
Yeah, I put out on Twitter over the weekend that for me, Mo Diamandi is probably more replaceable than Nico Rashkin is in terms of our kind of crown jewels in the Rangers midfield.
Yeah.
And that's just because of the kind of profile that Mo Diamandi is. We've seen in not too recent history players like Glenn Kamara, who's come in for relatively low money, and we've probably moved him on too late to get proper return for him. And I think that's where the Diamandi sale is probably really important, because you strike while the iron's hot. And if there is interest from the Premiership in Mo Diamandi this summer, then potentially that is the time to look at maybe moving him on, and then that 10 to 15 million with a fairly hefty sell-on clause that I think would need to go
Yep.
in there, then that allows you to then go and maybe bring in a couple of players rather than just kind of one in, one out. Whereas the way Nico Rashkin finished last season, he's someone who can be the heartbeat of the team or the heartbeat of the new team. And I don't necessarily think that he declines in value over the course of the next 12 months. If we can maybe get him to sign another deal for another
That's
12
the
months to
key.
protect that
Yeah.
investment. If he goes on to be captain in waiting for the season ahead, has a really strong season again, both domestically and internationally, continues to be in and around the Belgian national team with a big tournament next summer, you're going to make the same money you would make on Nico Rashkin this summer if you can do that. So I think for me, Rashkin's more vital to build the team around than say someone like a Mo Diamande. As good a player as Diamande can be on his day, I don't think you saw that day often enough. And I get what you're saying, that maybe a coach such as a Davide Ancelotti may well be able to get more of a tune out of a Diamande more often than certainly what Phil Clement managed to do. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer, I think, when it comes to both of those players.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that's key in that is that you look how Raskin is in this squad, he's absolutely loved by everyone. He's always sort of first one to go up to someone celebrating. He's always kind of encouraging people. He's a great team player, it looks like from the outside anyway, when you're at games and stuff. Again, your social media is always like with the players, he's always sharing stuff. He's very engaged with the rest of the squad. I think, like you said, he makes a perfect captain replacement. And we're all talking about it. We could happily sell the majority of that squad, but the fact is, you're probably lucky if you sell half a squad in one window. That'd be pretty good going from where we are just now. There's going to need to be some players retained, and we're losing a lot of big names, big personalities in terms of Balogun's away. We all expect Butland to go. No one's really known about Tav at this point, but again, he could easily move on this summer. And suddenly, you look at the sort of leadership group, that famous phrase we've said over the years, but there's really not anyone left when those three go. I mean, you look at maybe Suter, but again, his contract's up next year, so there's a lot of gaps in terms of not instilling Rangers about. I don't really buy into that side of it too much, but in terms of just sole leadership, sort of driving the club on, we're going to be bringing a lot of new faces in at every level, really at staff level,
Yep.
at boardroom level, player level. You do need some guys in there that sort of know what certain games are about, know what certain places I like to go to, all these kind of things. And I think Raskin is purpose built for that. Diomande maybe less, so he just seems to try and go on with it, which is fine. You know, you're going to have players like that, but it just stretches back to what you said there. I think Raskin would be a massive loss for the club. Again, I'm
Yeah.
trying to manifest him staying as much as possible.
Yeah,
but
I'm in the same boat. But we all know that he's probably the most saleable asset of anyone. So we'll watch that with interest. And I think if he doesn't sign a new deal, then just business wise, he does have to go this summer. Couple of questions coming in on the stream, and we certainly encourage you to get involved with that. Both Bob and Susan getting involved here. So we'll start with Bob's question. Is there any substance in the Jamie Vardy link with Rangers? Obviously, this one broke this morning, reported in the Daily Mail. Ian, well known, obviously, that Jamie Vardy is going to be moving on from Leicester this summer. It's got a lot of echoes, I think, with the Jermaine Defoe deal from a few years back in terms of a proper experienced pro that can come in at the tail end of his career and be a consummate professional and someone that obviously knows his way to goal. I'm not sure that there's too much in it other than the fact that Jamie Vardy's available. I would be amazed if Jamie Vardy's the number one target in terms of Rangers looking at a striker this year, because it doesn't fit the model in terms of bringing someone in to then develop and then sell on 2-3 years down the line for a profit. Jamie Vardy's 38. Now, if we get to a scenario where Rangers sell Danilo and Cyril Dessers in this window, Hamza Yaman's obviously attracting some interest as well, then we will be looking at bringing in some forward players. Do I think Jamie Vardy could do a job for us over a season like Jermaine Defoe did? Yes. do I see him being the main man next season for Rangers? No.
Yeah, no, I'd probably agree with that. I think it's a case of he wouldn't be a bad option. Don't think anyone would be too against it, but you'd probably rather someone on the opposite end of their career. It all kind of depends on what the plan is here, because, like you say, Dessers could move on, but I kind of expect him to stay. I mean, he finished the season really well. I've not been in that camp of Dessers is the problem. I just don't think you can rely on Dessers, so I'm not really too keen on him being the main man either. But on the wages he's on and the kind of profile in the squad, I'd expect him to be a starter if he's still here. So if you're looking at a front three, if just for talking sake, you've got not front three, but three options there of Dessers, Igaman, and Jamie Vardy. I don't know if that wins you a league, to be honest. It's one of those ones where it could get to late in the window and things start to get a bit ropey, start to panic a little bit, where a Jamie Vardy type could come in. But for me, I'd rather be looking at maybe a loan for, okay, just no one exactly, but a Premier League loan, a loan from Spain, especially if it's Ancelotti coming in, of a young striker who you can give some game time to, try and develop, maybe put that optional fee in there. That would be what I think suits the model a bit more, because you obviously do need some experience in there. You need guys that have been there and done it, but the stage Jamie Vardy's at, like you say, he's 38, he's going to get injuries over the course of a season. His career was built on that ton of pace, that electric pace that he had. He's never been a very great finisher. I don't know if that's maybe a bit harsh, but a lot of his goals are running behind and then finishing. We don't really play like that. That's very different playing for Leicester in the Premier League compared to Rangers in Scotland, where it's a back five, it's those low blocks. I don't know if he'd have that side of his game that he might need. And as I say, if it was a fourth choice striker on a low wage, as Defoe kind of was at the time, that's perfect for me. That's ideal. But if Vardy was coming here to be not the main man as such, but to get plenty of game time and to try and be relied on, I wouldn't be too confident in it. And I don't expect him to be taking low wages either, because there's chat about Burnley being interested. There's a few.
Yeah, I think he will have interest in England,
Oh, sure.
whether it's teams like Wrexham that have got deep pockets that are looking for a kind of marquee signing. You look at teams out in Saudi, you look at teams in America that are probably much more aligned as to where Jamie Vardy probably is at this stage in his career. Does he get another gig in the Premiership? Well, probably, because he played a lot of games last year for Leicester. So a team like a Burnley or a Sunderland or someone might go, absolutely, you know what, that's worth 50 grand a week to us. Now, Rangers are not paying Jamie Vardy 50 grand a week. So it's a case of Rangers can't compete with that. Susan, also on the stream, thank you for your question, Susan, asking me about Danilo. Danilo played very little football for Rangers last season for one reason or another, injury mainly, but even when fit, was very sparingly used by Barry Ferguson towards the end of the season, mainly down to obviously the fact that Cyril Dessers was in great form at the end of the season, which I think had a little bit to do with that. But he's never been a player that Rangers have really been able to rely on too much, but he's probably still got a bit of credit in the bank that would make him probably a saleable asset. Now, do I think Rangers should have a £6 million striker as a third choice striker? Then no, we shouldn't. That third choice striker should be, as you mentioned, a young prospect or someone that's on relatively low wages, not a Brazilian that costs £6 million. If Rangers are paying £6 million for anyone, they should be in the team 9 games out of 10. And Danilo's not that player. So I like Danilo. I think he's got a lot of positive attributes. Do I see him being here next season? I probably see him being at Rangers less than I see Cyril Dessers or Igaman next season.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. I think even if it's a case of moving him on for a loan just to get rid of the wages at this point, because it's hard, because I've been in that camp for over a year now saying Danilo's a good player, he will do well for us, he just needs to get fit. And how many guys over the years have we had that exact quote about? It just can't go on. And again, he's been unlucky. He's had some bad injuries. You think of the one off his face at St Johnstone, the knee injury at Hearts. It's been just little moments that have really derailed his Rangers career. But even when on the park recently, he's not looked the same player. And that was a real frustration of me towards the end of Barry Ferguson's tenure there. It's a case of at least give us a couple of starts in a row of Danilo. Let us see what he can do when he gets a bit of match fitness. Can he get some goals, get assists? Because I do think he links the play a lot better than Dessers ever could. A bit tidier than Igaman as well, but he wasn't getting a game for a reason. And it's quite telling for me when I was at the press conference for the last game at Ibrox there, where Ferguson was kind of asked directly, what's going on with Cortez and Danilo, what's happening here, and it was very quick to say that if you don't show that effort in training, I'm not going to pick you. So again, it seemed a little bit more tailored to Cortez, I must say, but both of them are kind of tarred with that same brush. And again, if you're not putting that effort in to get yourself match fit, to get yourself available, and to be relied upon, we can't have you lingering about, regardless how good a footballer you are. And as you said, we're a little bit limited squad-wise in terms of who could get us some money. I don't think a team pays anywhere near what we paid for Danilo right now. That's out of the question. But if it is a loan for a year, get a bit of a fee on that, get the wages out of the way, and just see if he can sort of recapture some form to then sell him on or bring him back into the fold. I think that's a safer bet than even having him third choice at this point, because it's just a jersey down.
And that's kind of where I'm at. It's a kind of short window situation for someone like Danilo, like we've had this season with the likes of Ben Davies down at Birmingham. Very much was a go out, play every week, show what you can do, so that someone come in and will buy you. Now, whether that's Birmingham City, which we certainly expect to kind of thumb up their interest in, both him and Kieran Dowell this summer. And again, Rangers won't be difficult to deal with regards to both of those players. But he's went out and he's played every week and shown actually that at that level he's a good player. Now, he's not shown that at Ibrox or at Rangers, and I don't necessarily see the door being open for him to come back and get another option to be a Rangers centre-back for next season. I do expect he'll move on this summer, but that loan deal to Birmingham was perfect for what we needed to be for him. So I don't disagree with that, and it may then allow maybe someone like Lauren Shanklin to come in on relatively low wages on a free, to come in and be that third striker that you know that he knows the way to goal in Scotland and can play up at Dingwall or can play at Livingston or can play at Kilmarnock. That means that you don't necessarily need to go out and spend big money on someone that's not going to be your main number 9.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, because if you just think of it on face value, say you are at these games, you're away to Ross County, you're struggling for a goal, and you look at your bench and you've got Danilo there, I don't see him as that guy who can come on and change a game. Shanklin probably could. I think he can absolutely make a goal, score a goal. He's got a bit more about him. He suits the league, as he's proven over these years with Hearts. So, again, you need to look at every out and every in as like a replacement, a direct replacement for each other wherever possible. So, if you lost a Danilo, got some money back there to bring in Shanklin on a free, massive improvement. For me, it's quite similar to Lyle Cameron. I see him taking that role that maybe a Kieran Dowell had at the start of the season for the first 6 months. Again, look at your bench. Who do you want on? Do you want Dowell or do you want Lyle Cameron? You want Cameron? You think he could bring something to the team? And if you make enough of those sort of improvements every transfer window, that's the only way to be successful for me. Because again, I go back to it. We've got so many players in this squad that we simply need rid of. You touched on Davies and Dowell, but there's Cifuentes knocking around. There's Leon King's coming back from loan. These guys that just don't have a future at the club. And again, I like Leon King 4 years ago. Hasn't got any better. You need to move him on. Ross McCausland. Again, you might tick a few boxes for your quotas and homegrown status and stuff, but you're not going to win a league relying on these guys. So you need to get them out, get someone in who can affect the game, can get you a goal, can get you a moment, because that's, I hate comparing Rangers and Celtic, but you have to do it. If you look at guys on their bench that come on, they do impact the game a lot more than anyone at Rangers does, because they have the firepower, they have the numbers across the squad that can do that, and we just have never had that for years now.
Yeah, and I think for me, Lyle Cameron is our version of what Luke McCowan is for Celtic. He's the first sub that comes on. It gives you energy and quality off the bench when you're wanting to give your starting number 8, your starting number 10, kind of a bit of a breather after 60 minutes. Luke McCowan did that pretty much week in, week out for Celtic last year, to the point where I think he can be there. I think Lyle Cameron's got every chance of being a Scotty Arfield type player that can score you goals from midfield. I know Bob's just put a question in there. I think he's exactly the type of signing that Rangers should be making from Scotland. I think there's a couple other players in Scotland that we could do similar with. I think Penrice at Hearts, for example, I think is a massive upgrade on what Ridvan Yilmaz would be in terms of our other option at left back if Yefty's not quite there. I think the thing with Ridvan that I've always said is he's not particularly defensively sound. he doesn't really create that many goals, doesn't score that many goals. So what is he if he's not that? And that's where we've been really spoiled by Tav pretty much every season,
100%,
apart from last year, because he gives you numbers from that position that we just haven't been able to replicate. And I think Yefty's got some tools to do that, but I think his end product needs a lot of work as well. And then you kind of hope that a good coach can do something with him. But I think Cameron's got the tools to be able to be that sort of kind of goal scoring midfield player, someone like a Greg Docherty was in the past, someone like Jason Holt was back in his day. That's just someone that's a very handy player to have in the squad. Maybe doesn't play every week, but is there. And I would much rather see a Lyle Cameron coming on than a Kieran Dowell.
Yeah, it's fact. And Bob's question is quite key, because Lyle Cameron probably will just be a squad player. There's no harm in that. There's no shame in that. If you're bringing a guy in for free, probably low wages compared to most of the squad, I'd imagine he's like that lower percentile for sure, but he's a very reliable, handy player. And that's what wins league titles, because Raskin can't play 38 league games, Diomande can't play 38 league games, plus the European games, plus the cup games. These guys aren't machines. If they two stay, they would probably be starters, but they need to come out now and again. And again, it's something that we don't really seem to do at Rangers, because we're not ever in a position to do so. We don't go 4-0 up in games and think, okay, let's take you off. You get a rest, you have a breather. It's always going to the wire for 90 minutes to get a 1-goal win, to get a 2-1 win. So you don't have that luxury. And I think that's something that we really, I say need to work on. It sounds daft because you're saying we need to work on battering teams. But if we can do that and you can take your striker off, go have a breather, get a young kid on, get a youngster on, get your Lyle Camerons on, Connor Barron, perfect example. Just very low risk signings that could become great. Like I remember Ryan Jack came in and I didn't have a great expectation. I just thought he would be a squad player, just play down again. But he was absolutely key to winning the title, to win 55. Ryan Jack was at the forefront of that, and he was a massive player for the club over the years. And he came in on a free from Aberdeen. Little fuss, just another signing. And look what he became. That's what Barron, that's what Lyle Cameron, Penrice possibly, although that would obviously come with a fee. But these guys can help you win league titles. Not necessarily win it themselves, but they can help you get to that journey.
Yeah, but I saw something that was put on Twitter earlier about whether or not a team like Bruges go out and buy someone like a Josh Mulligan or a James Penrice. And the answer to that is no, they don't. But they go and buy a Belgian equivalent of Josh Mulligan or James Penrice, and they pad out the Bruges squad so that the rest of their players can be there. So successful Rangers sides have always had a nucleus of Scottish talent. Like no one here can tell me that Kirk Broadfoot was a brilliant footballer, but he was a Scottish lad that gave you everything he had and was a big part of that team that got to a European final. So that wasn't because Kirk Broadfoot was the best right back in Europe at the time that we could afford, but he suited what we needed. And best Rangers teams over the last 40 years have had a nucleus of Scottish players that know how to play in Scotland. And I think it's the one thing that we've probably lost over the last 10 years is we've not got enough of those players that know how to get the job done at Rugby Park. And if you think of next season, we're going to have 3 games against teams on plastic pitches with Falkirk and Livingston having coming up as well. So a few players that know how to do that would be quite handy.
Yeah, of course it is, because it's one thing coming to Rangers and selling like European nights and the old firms and the big games, but we haven't lost leagues over the years because of those games. We've lost because we can't go to Rugby Park and win. We couldn't go to Ross County and win comfortably. Like these games that you do need someone to just kind of roll the sleeves up, get on with it, and almost prep the rest of the squad and what's coming here. You know, not have any scars, but have a clear mindset of they'll be up for it, we need to be up for it, let's go, kill the game early. It just doesn't happen. And again, I'm not relying on Lyle Cameron to come in and do that, for example, but if there's 3, 4, 5 guys who have played in Scotland, 100 plus appearances, know what they're coming up against, and it's why I've been really keen on Penrice coming in as well, because it's like what I go back to, if you move out Redvan for $1 million or 2 million, bring in Penrice for $1 million or 2 million, for me that's an improvement. You're getting a guy you can rely on, knows the league, helps all the homegrown quota stuff, because that is important. You know, there's guys in there that need to be there to tick that box in Europe. So again, just these little things that help. pretty low risk again because we know we can handle what this league will throw at them. And again, this the problem for me is different areas. This squad, there's so much rebuilding to have to do. You touched on Jeffrey that I think we all quite like Jeffrey. He can become a good player, but I don't think he's there yet. So whether it's having Penrice, again, just easy example, but those two just alternating roles and playing week in, you play. That's an ideal scenario for me. Both pushing each other to get games.
Couple more questions coming from the chat. So Martin, warm welcome. Thank you for joining us on here. He asks about Jack Butland's Rangers future. Interesting one with regards to Jack Butland. Obviously got dropped at the tail end of last season before coming in for the last couple of games of the season. So Liam Kelly obviously playing a few games, was vital obviously with that penalty save in Europe, but did kind of very well for us. I don't think anyone's going into next season thinking that Liam Kelly is going to be Rangers number one. And then it goes back to, well, Jack Butland, fair enough, we didn't pay a transfer fee for him, but he's on big wages or comparatively big wages considering he's there. So if he's not playing, then he needs to be shipped out the door. And I think there are enough teams down in England that are probably looking for an English goalkeeper. Again, filling quotas and spaces and squads. You look at Newcastle trying to bring in James Trafford for that exact reason, because they need to have players. And I just wonder if that move for Trafford happens for Newcastle, that then opens up a space at Burnley for a goalkeeper. And I wouldn't be massively shocked at all to see Burnley coming in for Jack Butland under that, because I think that would work for a Jack Butland in terms of a move back to England where he's going to play as opposed to being second or third choice back on the bench. I think he's done that in his career. That's the reason why he came up to Glasgow in the first place, was to play games and to challenge for trophies. I wouldn't be massively surprised if that's maybe an option for Butland this summer.
Yeah, I think like you, I expect him to leave. Butland's a funny one, because if we had this conversation maybe 8-9 months ago, I'd have been saying, no, Butland's worth the money he's on. He's a massive goalkeeper for us, main man kind of thing. But the decline in him over this second half of that season has been a real shame to see. It's been really out of nowhere in terms of how good he started his Rangers career. But yeah, we'll have no bother moving a guy like Butland on. You know, he's played for England. He's been at Man United, albeit didn't play very much, but he has that big club knowledge about him. He has Premier League knowledge about him. And as you say, anyone who's played Football Manager knows how important that English quota is, and getting an English goalie on the books, trained in England, played there, from there, that's an easy sale for anyone. So again, it's funny because I've seen people say, oh, just get rid of Butland and just let him go for free. But again, I think you get a few million for him, because like you say, that role is massive for teams in England. Like every Premiership team has 3 goalies, and at least 1 or 2 of them always tend to be English because of that easy tick box that gets on. So if it wasn't a Burnley looking to bring him in as first choice, I could see even the top teams bringing him in as that third choice guy, because you look at what Carson at Man City, Tom Heaton at Man United, these guys aren't going to play any football. They're just there to coach a little bit, help out the younger guys coming through, give that bit of know-how that they know from the league. Jack Butland could easily fill that role. I think he's too good to fill that role just yet. I think he can be a player down there still. So I see him moving on. Again, it's one you shake hands with, thank him for what he's done. But you said it right at the start of your own question there. The wages he's on is probably the highest or joint highest with Tavernier maybe at the club. Massive one to get off the books. And in terms of the question, do we need a new goalie? Absolutely do. It's a priority position for me. Hopefully a younger goalie who's got a little bit of experience and can develop and just join that whole player trading quote that we love saying. But yeah, a goalie's massive to come in this summer.
Not Angus Gunn. That'll be the end I will say on that one, and I think that's why I'll be delighted if Russell Martin doesn't come in, because if it's Russell Martin, then I think Angus Gunn comes in as well. So let's hope that's not the case. Susan, thank you for joining us on here tonight. You've asked a question about the Rangers Academy. Obviously, the big news at the tail end of last week obviously was the takeover being ratified, but we also saw a lot of youngsters released at the end of their contracts, including 3 players with first team experience, and Cole McKinnon and also Adam Devine moving on as well, and Archie Stevens, who I think we all felt had maybe a bit of a chance of making it as a Rangers player. For whatever reason, didn't quite happen for Archie Stevens. Likes of Finlay Curtis, I think, certainly usurped him and kind of got ahead of him in the queue. Aside from Finlay Curtis, probably Mason Munn, who ended the season injured, or obviously Bailey Rice, who are the kind of key players from that academy. There's not much at that kind of 17, 18 level that are ready to go, I think, in terms of being able to challenge it in the team. And the decisions made by Rangers to go and play Lowland League football hasn't really helped develop these guys that are such as like your Adam Devines, people like that. Like you mentioned Ross McCausland earlier as well. He's another one who I think has regressed just with the lack of first team football to the point where he's probably now not ever going to be a contention to be a player like Leon King's in exactly the same boat. I think he can go out and make a career for himself, but I don't see it being at Rangers. So outside of maybe a few really talented kids that are maybe at kind of the 16, 17 level, there's not much in the cupboard at that kind of 18, 19 level that you can see are knocking on the door to say, I'm next in line to come in and beat out the squad a little bit in terms of that option. So the fact that Rangers are kind of making a lot of calls of those players that are kind of at that kind of 19, 20 level, that's the reason for it, is because there isn't a pathway for the team for them, and they're not going to play games because they've made that decision that the B team that plays in the SPFL Trust Cup, that's going to be an 18s team for next season. So
yeah, it's a real shame because every club, us especially, want young guys coming through who have been at the club for 10, 15 years when they get to 18, 19, 20 and sort of just seeing that path develop. That's what every fan wants. But when you look at it like individually, the boys just aren't good enough. And I think that's Rangers' fault for this last few years with the B team, with the lack of loans at times, with the lack of opportunities at times. But when you look at it like cold hearted day, like Archie Stevens didn't get a game at Dunfermline. Leon King wasn't exactly regular at Queen's Park there. Devine was similar. If you're not getting a game in the Championship when you're 18, 19, 20, you're never going to cut it at Rangers. And as I say, we could have been doing these loans 2-3 years ago, give them some appearance off the bench here and there and help them get that journey, or even help with a B team as it would. But it's not good enough, and it's not been good enough for years now, bar the odd one or two exceptions that are coming through. It's a real frustration. I mean, I do a lot of the academy scouting, and the last few years, I've seen a lot of the B team, especially maybe 2-3 years ago when there were well coverage and there was a lot of those best v best games going on. I tried to get to a few of them. And the players at that time, I thought, we've got a real chance, a good crop coming through here. But you'd go and see them 6 months later and there'd be no real improvement. Same kind of ability level. Another 6 months, nothing really changed. It's just been such a mess from start to finish. I just hope now that we've learned lessons from that in terms of the guys at the academy just now. And as you say, the 14, 15, 16-year-olds that are coming through get a different opportunity. We explore loan markets. I know there was chat about some sort of affiliation link with Wraith Rovers going on. I don't know if that ever actually got played out, but I think that would be a good step to get 3-4 of our guys into a competitive league where they're going to get challenged, they're going to come up with different problems and see how they cut it. And if they do well there, you try and move them to another team in this league and just give them a year or two of proper first team football, because out with Bailey Rice, as you say, there's not really anything outfield wise that you can sort of say, okay, that boy's going to have a real impact this season. Can he play? And again, we get the comment from Bob there, it's just good timing. Robbie Fraser was really good at Livy there. I like Robbie Fraser. I would not be against him staying in the squad, but I don't think we've seen enough of him as a Rangers player to properly judge, like, right, you're good enough, Robbie, on you go. And even at that, he's a couple of years older than the guys we're speaking about there. So,
yeah,
again, wouldn't mind him staying, but it's a real problem area that I hope the board are aware
I think
of.
for me, for Robbie Fraser, is he's gone out and he's played football at Livingston, and he could go and have a career, kind of like the same as Lewis Mayo has done at Kilmarnock. So I think Rangers probably need to be fair to Robbie Fraser and look at him and go, do we see you playing for us next season? And if the answer to that question is no, then I think they need to kind of let him go and be a Livy player like Lewis Mayo is now a Kelly player, because there's a career for him there. And I think you're on the risk of, if you keep him around because you need to keep people around, of him turning into Leon King. And that's no disrespect to Leon King, but he's a player who had the big Premiership teams looking at him 4 or 5 years ago, and now as you mentioned, last season he wasn't even getting a game for Queen's Park, who got relegated for the Championship. So that tells you a lot about where Leon King's career has gone.
See, even saying that, but we're doing ourselves a real harm in that sense, because even if you get a guy to his 18, 19-year-old, Lewis Mail's a good example. Yes, you need to move him on to Kilmarnock, get a little fee for him, but you can put a buyback in there, you can put a little percentage of next move, and yes, it might not cut it at Rangers, but he might find his feet at Kilmarnock, he might then move on, get another level, and the little fees come in, you get a buyback option obviously there, which obviously Spanish teams seem to be really keen on doing and bring their best talent back in after a few years, but there's no harm doing that. It's not a negative, it's a little bit of a reward for us for all those years of coaching and having a say in their career, and then as you say, these guys get a proper footballing career, which is every kid's dream, so it's a win-win, whereas if you hold on to them until their contracts run out, and just like these guys here, just have to let them go, then it's a loss to everybody, and it's a real shame.
Yeah, obviously Bob's comment there that we do need to at least keep some of them for the homegrown quota. Yep, I agree with you on that, and some will obviously stay. I mentioned obviously the ones we did there, the likes of Mason Munn, who I think will be our third choice goalkeeper for next season. Yes. Lewis Bowden-Aukes has been released, so he's not there anymore. So Mason Munn will be the third choice keeper. You look at Bailey Rice, he's there, he qualifies. You've got Finlay Curtis as well, so that's three straight away. You then get the Scottish born buys, like Cameron, you've got Barron, so I think you've got Suter there as well. So I don't think we're too far away from being able to fill that quota from what's already in the cupboard. But I get your point on that. Couple more things just before we kind of round the stream up tonight, and to say a big thank you to everyone that's joined us tonight that's put some questions in. We'll try and do a few more of these certainly over the course of pre-season to kind of update you with regards to any kind of transfers coming in and out of the door. All signs, Ian, pointing towards Rangers manager being, or head coach being appointed certainly by the end of this week. Some whispers stating might even be as early as tomorrow. It's important, obviously, now with Kevin Thelwell in the door alongside Purdy, that we get a bit of a move on and we properly assess who's in the squad, who we're wanting to retain, who we're wanting to try and move on. And that happens relatively quickly because we are only really 4 or 5 weeks away from that first European qualifier, and it's against a team such as Servette or Panathinaikos, so that's not a free hit by any stretch of the imagination, and we're going to have to be ready in times of be having a team that's gelled and ready to go for that first game against whoever it turns out to be.
Yeah, it's my one kind of worry with the whole Rangers situation just now. I mean, we've talked on the positives and the excitement at the club and stuff, but pre-season starts 3 weeks today. The game, a friendly week after that kind of thing. So this comes around very quickly. We need not only players in, we need players out. And as you said, the word gel is so important here because you look at last summer, we didn't do it right. We've done it all too late and we ruined the Champions League qualifying for ourselves. We can't afford to do that again because Servette, Panathinaikos, you touched on it, they're not mugs. They will happily come here with settled teams, good teams, and give us a proper game. And if you get through that round, you've got guys like Benfica and Club Brugge coming. Again, some of the best Rangers teams we've ever seen would struggle in those fixtures. So a lot to do. I just, like you say, I hope the management announcement is tomorrow. We can start getting some proper activity in terms of transfers. It's not just rumours. Again, the rumours are great. It's exciting to see ins and outs, and especially some of the outs just now, sadly. But until you start to see the official confirmations, the scarf pictures, the leaked photos coming through, you don't really know what we're getting here. And it's so key, especially if it's a manager like Ancelotti coming in, which I think most of us think is going to happen here because he's a new manager. He's not had this role before himself. He'll want things settled as much as we do in terms of getting his own philosophies and plans and ideas and tactics, all these good things. He'll want that as soon as, whether it's a case of not even waiting until pre-season starts. I think he'll start to have some certain conversations with certain players as early as his first day kind of thing. I can see all that happening, and then we get rolling. So yeah.
And I think that it's about proper recruitment and recruitment in the right areas. With Lexi's comment there, 20 million can buy you 4 Raphael Scheitz or 20 Calvin Bassies, and I think it's a great point. Not everyone's going to be a Calvin Bassey that you can bring in for 300 grand and 18 months later is sold for 22 million, right? That's fantasy football stuff that doesn't always happen. However, I think that over the course of the next couple of days, Ancelotti doesn't come to Rangers and not get given the funds to get a team to play in his style, because he just doesn't take that opportunity. He doesn't come away without that investment promise that's there to him. I think he's obviously mentioned that he's got a backroom team that's ready to go. I think that there are players from, maybe not necessarily from the Real Madrid first team, but players from Spain that are the kind of that area of the world that are ready to go, that can come in relatively quickly, I think. And I think it'd be really interesting to see what that team lineup is for that first game against Club Brugge, which is only just a few games away in terms of that first pre-season friendly. But then obviously get the game with Middlesbrough as well before that first European qualifier. And we'll leave you just with us, just kind of throw it out there. Tav's testimonial still to be announced as well. Wherever that may be, against whoever that may be, it's going to come though, right?
Of course it is. Tav's going nowhere. If Tav's here, he's playing as well, and he's captain. That's my slight concern here. Albeit I love Tav, I need to say that every time I start slating him, but a new regime, a new board needs a new playing squad, and for me, Tav's at the forefront of that change.
Yep. Big thank you to everyone that's joined us on the stream tonight, to the guys that have asked questions, to Bob, to Lex, to Donald, to Martin, to Susan. Thank you for joining us. As I say, we'll do these more regularly. Ian, in terms of, obviously you've joined us tonight, but where can people see you more regularly, your usual home? Yep,
usually with This Is Ibrox, your Rangers podcast. We're on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the usual stuff. We're there. Usually it's a Sunday night and Wednesday night show. So, yes, please feel free to join in.
Thank you very much. A big thank you to you all for watching. We'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.